Hello, everyone watching. This is going to be about a 30-minute, live stream, now recorded, of just a little presentation on rudiments. It's very, very basic, and just what I think are, the fundamental rudiments that we should know as drummers and percussionists before we, dive into, harder ones. So I labeled it the rudimentary rudiments because it's kind of a play on words. When we think rudiment, it's kind of like as defined as, the basic principle of what we are, whatever we're studying or talking about, the rudiments, right? The beginning, the basics, the common principles. But for rudiments and drums, there are complex rudiments that are definitely not for beginners to start out on. So that's why I labeled this the rudimentary rudiments, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to go to this next slide. I'm going to be kind of going back and forth with Zoom. It's a little bit hard with going back and forth, so I hope you can see the slide. It should be on there right now. I don't know why it's not changing. Oh, we'll go like that then. We'll just do my slide like that. So for here, what is a rudiment in drum lingo? Common definition for this would just be, sticking patterns. Simple as that. Sticking patterns of your rights and your lefts. That's pretty much all it is. Just different types of strokes put together into little patterns. There's two main categories, which we'll get more into as we go through these rudiments today. One of those categories is efficiency, and one is musicality. And both can be efficient, no matter what rudiment is, and both can be musical. But they usually fall leaning on one side or the other. Why we play rudiments? Rudiments are, it's kind of like asking why do we do scales when we play piano or another instrument? Why do we, one of the best sayings I ever had from one of my teachers is, a baseball player isn't just gonna play baseball and, slug balls all day. They're gonna exercise, they're gonna do strength training, they're gonna do cardio, they're gonna do all that kind of thing to make them a better version of what they're doing. So like we're doing these rudiments to make gives ourselves more control, more endurance, more, independence in our limbs for this kind of thing. And to apply to our music, right? To apply to our drumming. So that's why we practice these rudiments. I think that's and a good allusion to, is the whole sports thing. If you want to be good at sports, you don't just play the sport. You do other things to practice to get better. And yeah. So how are we gonna start practicing these? Slow and steady, and we'll get into that more. So these are what I think are the 7 essential rudiments, and I'm keeping an eye on the time. Hopefully I can get through all of them. If not, that's okay. I kind of prioritize them from top to bottom. So we have single stroke roll, double stroke roll, single paradiddle, multiple bounce roll, flam, drag, and then a 5-stroke roll. All very important in drumming, all very rudimentary in rudiments. So let's just go to the most basic one, single stroke roll. So single stroke roll is just kind of how it sounds, and you see it on the page here. So it's simply right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, back and forth as many times as you can do it. So I'm going to stop the share right now, go to the live stream, and hopefully this will be a bigger version of me. Hopefully you see me in the full screen now. But single stroke roll, simply right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Greatest exercise. So this is assuming that you've got a basic foundation of how we hold the stick, right? Nice soft pinch. I'm doing it match grip, and you've got some sort of, idea of rebound, right? I always say pull the note from the instrument versus pushing the note in. So we just want a nice rebound stroke when we practice these. Just make it the stick bounce up. And if that's all you need to practice for now, just do that. Make sure that stick can bounce up on its own, right? I'm not pulling it back up at all. I'm letting it bounce right back up, your rights and your lefts, right? And I'm just on a drum pad here, so it works on so many different kind of surfaces. You don't need a drum set at home by any means. Practice on something that, hopefully you don't mind getting a little scuffed up from hitting so many times with a drumstick. But so let's just get into the single stroke roll. Great exercise to start with is just nice, slow, and steady. Okay, so just start with your dominant hand. So I'm a righty, so I'm going to start with my right hand. And we'll get into this whole practicing your less dominant and your dominant hand in a bit here. So let's just get into the single stroke roll. What I like to do to start out with most of my students, just start quarter notes for 2 measures. So we're in 4 here. Quarter notes for 2 measures, 8th notes for 2 measures, and if they can, 16th notes for 2 measures. And if you time it right, if you set a slow enough tempo, it'll be totally fine. So say if this is my tempo, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, left, right, left, right, left. Here I go, 8th notes, right, left, right, left. Same tempo, right, 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 left. 16th notes, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2. Then I go back to the 8th notes. Back to quarter notes, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So simple as that. You can make it any way you want. But basically, single stroke rolls, usually it's the most simple rudiment that you can start with. And you want to focus on evenness and control when we start. So starting slow is so important before you even think of getting faster, that we just want to, make sure we've got nice rebound strokes, are comfortable. It's creating a similar sound every time you hit it, right? Same stroke height. Yeah. So with the whole less dominant hand, and this is the way you want to practice all rudiments. So have this apply to every single rudiment we go from, so that we're covering today. I want to focus on starting with your left. So start with your less dominant hand, or whatever your left. So if you're a lefty, it's probably going to be your right. But in my case, I'm a righty. I'm going to start with my left. So same exercise. On the beat, it's going to be the left first. So left, right, 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 left, 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 left. This is a condensed version of what we just did. But basically, that makes your right hand teaches your left hand almost. If you do those, you do the exercise, and then you just lead it with your other hand, your less dominant hand. Cool, so let's continue. I'm gonna screen share again. I'm sorry for this little pause every time. This is the only way we could really figure out doing it here. Let's go here, screen share, screen mirroring. Okay. So hopefully you can see this again. So that was our single stroke roll. Single stroke roll falls under the efficient category, I would say. So if you think about it, we could just take one stick and try to go as fast as possible, right? So somewhere along the lines in history, they're like, okay, this is really hard to do it really fast with just, one hand. Oh wait, let's use both limbs. That was probably discovered within like 5 seconds. But when you think about it, it makes it efficient because you're using both limbs to create one sound, one faster sound, a controlled sound, right? So that's the idea with a single stroke roll. Let's continue on to our double stroke roll. And this is just represented in 8th notes in this certain picture, but it can be anywhere over the board, double strokes. Double strokes is kind of like a single stroke, but you do 2 strokes per hand. So right, right, left, left, right, right, left. And I'm going to come back to me here really quick. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so now we're back on, to me, hopefully, in the full view. So double strokes, I'm going to lead with my dominant hand first and just practice. Again, practicing on a steady, steady tempo. Practicing with a metronome is a must with this kind of thing, especially when you're starting out. Comfortable, relaxed, shoulders relaxed, chest relaxed. If these are tight, you're never going to, progress in speed and control with these rudiments and playing in general. So double stroke roll. I'm going to just start it, do that same kind of exercise from last time, doing 2 measures of each value of note. So quarter note, eighth note, 16th, and back down to eighth note, and back down to quarter. I like to call that my accordion exercise. I say that's like, it's kind of like, getting bigger and smaller. So like you get faster or you kind of breathe. It's kind of a breathing motion. Closer together, farther apart. Closer together, farther apart, but it's staying on one consistent tempo, right? It's just different subdivisions. Okay, so double stroke roll. Here we go. Quarter notes first. 1, 2, here I go. Right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. Great. So double stroke roll is when we really, really have to start focusing on our rebound, because the reason double stroke roll is created is for efficiency. Efficiency meaning, okay, so I can do my single strokes really fast, right? But I want to go faster. So how do I make that happen? We have this double stroke here. We can go pretty much twice as fast as you can do single strokes in theory, because what it is 2 strokes eventually when you get faster, 2 strokes per 1 downward motion of the hand. So I'm going to do this exercise called open, close, open. And basically what that means is slow, fast, slow in rudiments. So this is a very specific exercise for drummers practicing rudiments, is to control getting faster and slower. But I only recommend this when you are totally comfortable with playing the rudiment of whatever rudiment you're practicing at consistent tempos, at multiple tempos, okay? So slow, medium, fast, whatever tempo it may be. So don't do this until you really get an idea of what the rudiment is and be able to do it, with your eyes closed, kind of like doing something else or talking like I'm doing. So I'm going to start super slow, and at a certain point, you'll start to see me go from 2 strokes of the hand to 1 stroke of the hand. That's the whole idea behind double strokes. And there's no secret sauce to this. This is just simple repetition, finding what a controlled double stroke feels like. That rebound, really focusing on that. So here I go, slow. And with kids, I like to say it's kind of like a train leaving a station, right? So they don't take right off, right? They start slow, they get up to speed, and then they arrive at a different train station, right? Obviously, this is a short trip for us, but let's just focus on the open, close, open. Here we go. So right, right. And I'm serious when it's this slow, even slower if you want to start out. So, but we're progressively getting faster and faster. At a certain point, you'll start to see me only do 1 downward motion instead of 2 downward motions of the hand. See, I'm getting smaller, how the rebounds are getting closer to the drum. Very common when we get faster. Very short train ride, but for time purposes, this is what I'm trying to get at. Practicing this is similar to like, I don't know, like doing a benchmark in sports, like seeing where your peak is, where you're most comfortable at your peak, right? Where's your fastest time? With this, we don't want to go so fast that we mess up, right? Right, and it just kind of fizzles out. We want to go as fast as we can go comfortably and then come back down. This is about control, not the speed, this kind of exercise, contrary to popular belief among many beginner students. So double stroke roll, incredibly important rudiment, will help you tremendously when it gets to drum set playing. And yeah, I hope that helped. Okay, next rudiment is what we all love to say because a lot of rudiments are onomatopoeic, meaning they sound the way they sound like they are spelled or said. So the word sounds like the action. Let me share this really quick. So here we go. Single paradiddle. Paradiddle, right? Sounds like the way we play it. Paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. And basically, what a paradiddle is a single stroke, so right, left, followed by a double stroke, right, right, and vice versa. Left, right, left, right, left, left, sorry. So the way you practice this is how it shows on the screen. Right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. So this, again, falls under efficiency. Instead of 4 full strokes, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can do 3 strokes. So 1, 2, 3, right? So that double stroke on the second half of the rudiment. What I'm going to do now, so basically, the way to practice it, still steady, 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 slow, controlled, nice rebound strokes. Coming back to me, I hope. When we play, same kind of exercise. Right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. Because it kind of switches off. Because if you play right, left, right, right, the next stick that you would need to use is the other one that you left off from, that you didn't leave off from. So right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. Paradiddle, paradiddle. Paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. So on and so forth. That same kind of exercise, that accordion exercise, that growth and that the tight, starting with notes that are farther apart, getting closer, so getting to the smaller subdivisions, right? So when we play this, we really just want to focus on the hardest part about paradiddles is having the right, left, right, right, and having to keep the stick down after. So this kind of breaks the rebound rule. So watch how high my sticks get. Right, left, right, right. See how that first initial stroke, like the right here, left here. See how it stays it's like the only one that goes high. That's the way we want to think for pretty much when we're always playing paradiddles. Because eventually, once that double stroke turns into just a single hand motion, so on and so forth. When it turns into a single hand motion, we want to keep the drumsticks low. So that is a super, super important rudiment, once again, to practice. I wouldn't have picked any of these rudiments if they weren't important. So yeah, and it applies to drum set. Once you get paradiddles down, paradiddles are huge to apply to drum set, right? So we have, just as a little example, I know I don't have a drum set with me. Let's say you want to get into some fills and, well, okay, how do I do that? Start with some paradiddles. Start with, just try it on the snare drum. Do like a groove, bar of groove, like a rock groove. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. 1 and 2. Great, you've got that down. Try your rights on the tom, and then your lefts on the snare or something. Mix up the instruments. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. That is a huge help with using creativity, but using it with common sense. You're practicing your rudiments, but you're applying it to make it musical, right? Cool. That's why I said from the beginning, each rudiment can be musical as much as it can be efficient. Okay, cool. Let's go on to how we do on time. Pretty good. Let's go back to screen share. Go to our next rudiment. So this is probably the outlier, one of the biggest outliers of all rudiments, if not the most, the biggest outlier, is the multiple bounce roll, also called the buzz roll for clear reasons. So it's usually represented with like a little Z above the note on whatever note value you're playing. Basically, it sounds like this. I don't know if in this recording right now, if you can see me in like a little box, but it's really for the sound. So multiple bounce rolls were created to create, from more of like an orchestral standpoint, to create sustained notes with a percussion instrument. Because, when we play a quarter note on a snare drum, the one quarter note, it sounds a whole lot like a whole note on a snare drum. So say if I were to play one quarter note, just without the roll on it, quarter note, whole note, right? They sound really similar. So obviously we need some way to sustain and represent. This obviously doesn't apply to every whole note out there, but when we want to hear percussion sustained, rolls are the answer. So we have a buzz roll or a multiple bounce roll, and it usually sounds like this. Multiple bounce meaning, unlike the double stroke or the open roll, it's not two strokes. It's literally like a buzz each time. So you can't even count the amount of times that the stick actually hits the head of the drum. So it kind of sounds like this. And it doesn't work very well with a drum pad, but it delivers the idea. So it sounds a lot cooler on a snare drum because you have, the resonance, and it really kind of makes this nice, once you get really, really proficient at it, it creates this nice, sustained, smooth, like kind of like a ocean wave, like a continuous ocean wave, just sound. And I'm gonna come back, and practicing this is like unlike any other rudiment for practicing. And the reason of that is because like we don't use this multiple bounce stroke for anything else but this, right? Like maybe except for one coming up, but even then it's not really used for anything else but that. The way you practice this, the way I learned way back, is just see how many times you can make your drumstick bounce on its own. Cool. Do it with the other hand. And start really slow. Just kind of put it together. It doesn't sound like what I played at first. Here's the finished product, right? Here's how we start. And kind of use that open, close, open method. Here how I just have a bunch. So this is that not controlled rebound, but we want as many rebounds as possible. And like I said, no secret sauce. It's just repetition, repetition. Use your ear, use your eyes to see if it's actually bouncing, right? What's restricting it? What's not restricting it? What felt better? What didn't, right? Cool. So great exercise. I love using for this. Use a core rhythm, like 16th notes, right? A measure of 16th notes. I like to do that, and then put a buzz on each one of those notes like this. So 1 E enda, 2 E enda, 3 E enda, 4 E enda, 1 E enda, 2 E enda, 3 E enda, 4 E enda. Because you can have rhythmic value in your arms. You can see it. You're playing 16th notes, but it just sounds like one continuous sound eventually. You're going to start out, don't get discouraged, excuse me, because it's not going to sound great in the beginning. Like I said, no secret sauce, repetition. So it's going to sound like this broken mess of like, what is that drum doing right now? It's going to sound weird. Your left hand's not going to be doing the same thing as your right hand. Like I said, repetition. Here we go. So I'm going to do that exercise a couple times so you get the idea. So it's just going to be a measure of 16th notes, a measure of buzzed 16th notes, if that makes any sense. So here I go. 1 E enda, 2 E enda, ready and go. Single strokes, buzz. Single strokes, buzz. Single strokes, buzz. Single strokes. Last time, buzz. Buzz roll or multiple bounce roll. Cool. All right. Let's go to our next one. Share screen. Oh, and by the way, that buzz roll, I'm just going to explain it really quick. So that buzz roll falls under the category of kind of like both, like the musicality and efficiency. So efficient because it can sustain a note, right? So that's cool. Like, you usually, like a trumpet can sustain a note for however long the breath can go by. Well, so can a snare drummer, and going, or whatever drum you're on, and making it sustain, right? A one continuous sound, no breaks in it, not even the double strokes, right? Because technically these are just really fast doubles. There's breaks in the note. So we want to emulate no breaks in the note itself. Hear the difference between a multiple bounce and a double. Here's multiple bounce. Here's double. Cool. All right, let's go back to the screen share. And now we are going to go on to flams. Flams fall under primarily musicality, the category in musicality. So what we want to focus on here, as you can see, is this little note, right? Usually called a grace note in music, followed by our main beat. So the first one with the little L and the big R, that's a right flam, right-handed flam. And then the one with the small R and the big L is a left-handed flam. So I'm going to start with my dominant, which is actually the right-handed flam. So basically it's one little note, one little grace note, and then one big note, which is the main beat, on one, well, note. So here, back and forth. This is what it is. Notice, you can probably, I don't know if you can see me in like a little screen right now, but I'm going to show you when it's tied like that and the little grace note, it means flam. That's as simple as that. What the biggest thing with flams are is that they cover only one beat. So it's just one beat. They're not two different notes. It just happens on one beat. This little note happens right before the main beat, so they can stay on a consistent beat. So I'm going to stop this screen share real quick and come back to me. I hope you can see me. I hope this whole time it hasn't been just nothing. But so let's try the flam. So here we go. So I like to start pretty exaggerated. Have the small note, right? So we're doing a right-handed flam. So I have my right hand ready to go for the big note, my small left hand, the left stroke, ready to go right before the big note. And there's no rule on the distance between the two notes, but here I go. And I'm alternating here. This is just the same. This is just rights, just lefts, alternating. So the hardest thing that students kind of can't wrap their head around when we first start out flams is that this is supposed to hit last. For some reason, they always like to go, they want to hit that main beat first. But we have to focus on creating this as one sound. Biggest rule about flams is to not hit at the same time. That's called a pop. We do not want to do that when we're practicing flams. We want to practice flams. So like I said, there's no rule in which the distance of the note should be, apart from each other. So it can be as tight as this, or it can be as loose as this. Eventually, it starts turning into a rhythm when you get farther apart. So kind of like 2/16 notes or even 32nd notes. But what we want to focus on is one nice, it kind of beefs up the sound, that one beat. The reason this falls under musicality is because when we play this, say if I were to play just like single strokes, just this one linear rhythm that just goes back and forth. Right? Kind of, you play that and it just sounds like you're practicing, or it sounds like, hammers on a house or something. It sounds very, boring, right? If I just add flams to that, it'll make it infinitely more interesting. So here I go. I'm only adding flams to what that rhythm just was. Here I go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool? It was much more interesting than the back and forth single strokes, right? So flams are what are creating this, I like to say, you know, this bigger, you know, fatter note, fatter sound, I guess you could say. So instead of one hit, it's, and it sounds much better, obviously, on actual drums, but when you start playing these, consistent rhythm. First, get it down, get the motion down, and only do rights, 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 and then switch to the lefts, 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 lefts. So just go right, 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 just so you can get that motion down. Then switch to the lefts. Only when you have both rights and lefts down, create the alternating effect. So we can practice this rhythmically. Right? It's pretty hard, but it is possible to do it in rhythm, right? Obviously, we want it on rhythm. But to make them faster, only get the motions down before you think of doing alternating. Cool? All right, let's move on to our next rudiment. One of my favorites. Moving to screen share here. And there we go. The drag. So the drag has many different variables, but we're going to cover the most basic. Drag, maybe called a rough too. Drag is somewhat like a flam, but instead of one little grace note, it can be two or more. So with the basic drag, it's usually two notes right before, and this applies the same way as a flam does on the same beat, right? We want to focus on keeping all of that information, so that LLR, RRL on their own beat. So here's how it sounds before I come back to the screen. And I'm going to do it all different variations, just to. So again, I'm going to go back to the screen actually to do that so you can see it a little bit better. But notice how the right drag is the two little L's with a big R, and then the left drag is the two R's with the L. So obviously that happens linearly, if that's a word, but it happens one after another. So left, left, right, 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 left, if you slowed it down quite a bit. So here I go, I'm gonna go stop share. And again, I hope you can see me throughout this. But what we wanna focus on is the rebound, the little rebound that happens before that note, that big note. So see how my drag hand, the smaller notes, don't lift up at all, just like in flams. They just do a little grace note, right? Two grace notes before. This is just two notes each on the drag. Now I'm going to kind of make it different, just to prove that a drag is still a drag, whether if it's this tight or this far apart or loose. Right? This was used in a lot of rudimental drumming. A lot of, you can use it in, you know, as grace notes or ghost notes, as drum set players call it, or the kind of like in between notes in orchestral playing, right? So I'll just play like a little something. So when you focus on these drags, you probably guessed by now that these fall also under the musicality section, right? It makes the note sound cooler versus just doing this. If I add drags, right? It makes it sound cool. It has this little fun effect right before the main beat happens, right? So when we play these, let's just practice. Technically, you could go right, right, left, but we want to focus on the rebound, right? Drag, drag, drag. Kind of it's like dragging along, right? So drag, 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 drag. So when we practice these, again, just start with all the rights. Get the motion down. Little diddle right before, the little double stroke, the grace notes, if you will. And drags or roughs can be multiple notes, like kind of like a buzz. That's what I was talking about. Well, the buzz stroke doesn't really apply to anything else but the buzz. This is that one exception. So you can have multiple notes before the main note, but we want to stick with 2 in the beginning. So here how there's a bunch of notes. So drum set playing, drags are awesome for little grace notes. Cool. One great tune I always start off with students with practicing drags, kind of like connecting the music to the rudiments, is Californication by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. How that drum beat, Chad Smith, he's kind of does that really nice drag right before his one. So it sounds great. All right, so those are drags, and I think I have enough time to do our last rudiment. It's gonna have to be quick, but this is the least important one to focus on at the current time. So 5-stroke roll, I'm gonna quickly go to it. Here we go, 5-stroke roll, screen share. Hope this is working the whole time. 5-stroke roll. Boom. It is created off a double stroke roll. There are more than just 5 and doubles. There are double strokes, 5-stroke rolls. There are 7-stroke rolls, 9-stroke rolls, so on and so forth. But what happens, basically, it is right, right, left, left, right. And then also that next one, left, left, right, right, left. So if you counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-stroke rolls are used in primarily rudimental drum corps, orchestral playing, but can totally be applied to the drum set. It's such a cool rudiment to use for fills and whatnot. But what we want to focus on is just getting that controlled stroke, right? So right, right, left, left, right. Oh, let me come back to me. Oh, what did I do? Okay, so it should be me. Basically, focus the controlled stroke. Right, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right, left. So try to put a little emphasis and put them within 2/8 notes. So 1 and 2 and. So like sped up a little bit. 1 and 2 and. 1 and 2 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's the best way to practice them at first. Obviously, just do rights first. So right, right, left, left, right. They can turn into so many different cool things, and I don't have a lot of time left to, kind of go over these, but once you get down these double strokes and these 5-stroke rolls and that controlled rebound, right? Try to do, like 5-stroke rolls on a drum set. One of my favorite fills, I think it was either Peter Erskine or Roy Haynes thing, where, this is jazz drumming we're talking about, is where they just did 5-stroke rolls continuously, and it's such a cool fill. And this might be over, if you're like, what is going on right now? No big deal. This is kind of the bonus round of this live stream, or this recording now, is just this cool 5-stroke roll. This is all it is. So he's just, you're swinging along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was just such a cool thing, and then I couldn't wrap my hand around this fill, and I realized it's 5-stroke rolls, and then I was like, well, I should probably start practicing rudiments more. So this is why you should practice rudiments. They are everywhere. They are the building blocks of what we do. Start slow and steady. Before you start the open, close, open, look at, practice in a mirror, practice with a metronome. Cool? I'm out of time. I have to teach right now, but I hope this was helpful, and I hope you continue to practice these rudiments. We've got plenty of time now to be at home and just, practice, practice, practice. So have fun with it, and have a good day.